Good morning. Thank you, worship team. You know that song we just sang is an old hymn. It's actually in the old school hymnals that we used to have when we had pews. And years ago, Susan just came across that song, and she loved the words and the message in it. And so she took it and she put it to that tune, that new tune that just made it more accessible. She wrote the refrain. And I was thinking about it as we were singing that, and I thought, if every church and if every follower of Jesus got the message of that song right, we would change the world. It's a message for another day. But welcome. It's great to be worshiping together. Thank you for being here in spite of the lack of snow today. For those of you who love snow and would rather be throwing snowballs right now than walking in the rain. Thank you for being here in person. Those of you who are online, you're probably the smartest folks in the crowd because you're home warm and dry and probably still in your pajamas, but you are with us in spirit, and we are all worshiping together because the Scripture says where two or more are gathered in my name, and that is even over the internet. He is here with us. So thank you for being here this morning. If you're a guest, if you're here for the first time, or maybe you've been here a few times, thank you for being with us. We want to welcome you as our guest. If you haven't filled out a connection card and you would like to do that, we don't want to put any pressure, but we'd love to just connect a name with the face. So there's a connection card right in front of you. You can fill it out and drop it in a box, the offering box in the back of the sanctuary on your way out. And if you're online, you can click that quick link and fill that out online. And also, just jumping into some announcements. If you're new or you've been coming for a while and you've never been to our intro class, it's been a long time since we've done an intro class due to just scheduling and a lot of stuff like that. But if you've never been, I want to invite you to our intro class. The end of this month, the last Sunday of the month, on the 26th at 5:30. We'll actually just meet right out in the lobby. We set that up with some tables and chairs because it's just a little more comfortable, and we're all familiar with this space. And so we'll meet for about an hour and 15 minutes to an hour and a half, maybe, depending on questions, and just go over a lot of the stuff about our church. Just answer questions, talk about some of our beliefs, how we're structured, how we make decisions as leaders in our church, what membership in this church looks like compared to maybe some other churches that you may be familiar with. So we'd love to have you join us for that if you're available to do so. You can just let me know. You can shoot me an email. You can see me out in the lobby, or you can respond to our newsletter. There's all the details in our newsletter that'll come out this Thursday. You can reply to that and let us know. And then small groups. We are launching small groups that same day. That'll be the week we launch small groups. Some of our Sunday small groups will start that day. Some of them will start the following Sunday. We'll let you know if you're in that group. But you can scan the QR code right in front of you. You can go to our website and follow the link for small groups, and it'll give you a description. We also have out on our information board out in the lobby clipboards with all of the small groups there. Lex is here. He'll be out in the lobby afterwards. I'll be out in the lobby. We'd love to talk to you about small groups and help you find one. We're going to talk about that a little bit more today as a part of the message. And then another group we're starting the 1st of March that I'm really excited about is called Grief Share. Ellie Bechtel is going to be leading Grief Share for us. Some of you know Ellie. This has been on her heart for a long time, and she's been thinking about this and praying about it. She's gone through it herself, gotten trained and certified to lead a group of Grief Share. And so if that's something you're interested in, you might want to check that out as well. It's similar, very, very similar to a small group, but it's a little bit different. So we decided to just kind of operate a little bit separately from our normal small group structure. So that might be something you want to jump into this semester is our Grief Share. And we're going to run it a cycle and kind of get our feet wet with it and then begin offering it to people outside of our church, people people who may find us through web searches and things like that. So if you're dealing with grief, and a lot of us, it's unusual just over the last couple of years how many people in our church have lost a significant person in their life. It's a bit unusual for a church our size. So I think it's just great timing that we're doing Grief Share now. And then finally, hypothermia response. And I'm going to have Melissa come up. She's going to share with us the most important thing that we need to know about hypothermia this week.
Thanks. Good morning. I'm Melissa, and I am on the leadership team with Hypothermia Response Ministry. Our week is coming up next week. Next Sunday is when we start. Sorry, I'm also very tired. So the most important thing to know is that we need everyone's help. We literally cannot do this without everybody. And I just wanted to highlight a couple of volunteer opportunities that we have. We do need help on the overnight shift. You guys, you can just play on your phone, read a book, crochet. Like it's the easiest shift. You might have to heat up a meal, but I think everyone can use a microwave. We got it. So we really need help there. And then there's also some morning and evening spots that we also need help with. So Anna and I will be out in the lobby, and you can talk to us and we can walk you through all of that. A couple other things. We have a prep day today. So right after the service, we're going to be on the other side of the building, mostly just getting our space ready for our guests. And again, anybody that would like to stay gets to have pizza and our eternal gratitude. So you get both those things. But that would be really helpful just to get everything ready to go. And then we found out this week that because our week falls over a holiday, the Lamb Center and libraries will be closed on President's Day. So we are going to keep our space open for guests to stay here so they don't have to just hang out outside all day. So there are some new shifts available there to come up and just like hang out for half a day and eat lunch. And then we're also going to be doing a volunteer training tomorrow. It's going to be online at 7:30. It's been a minute since we've had guests on our campus, and so it's just, if you've done it before, it's a good refresher. If you haven't done it, it'll give you an idea of how the run of day goes and what to expect, and just some like guidelines and stuff for like interacting with guests and volunteering. So if you are going to serve, try to make that. We are also going to send out a link with that. So if the time tomorrow doesn't work, we're going to send a link out to all the volunteers that are already signed up, and then you can watch it sometime during the week. So that's it. And any questions, you can see me and Anna out in the lobby.
Thanks, Melissa. So hypothermia coming up, check it out. We'd love to have your help with that. And last thing before we jump to prayer, I just want to let you know, just to update you a little bit on our strategic planning, because we haven't talked about that in a while. We started this back last year, late spring actually. And so some of our leaders that have been meeting, we had a retreat back last year towards the end of the year. We had our second retreat this past weekend. So about 20 folks spent Friday night, a couple hours Friday night, and then most of the day yesterday here, just kind of working through some processes with Rich, our consultant, just to kind of start landing the plane on some strategic objectives for our church. So we've got a good bit of work to do over the next few months, and then we'll be coming to you with some real concrete ideas of what we're suggesting or want your input on and want to kind of figure out moving forward. Just wanted to let you know, though, that was still working, that was still in progress, and we will keep you up to date along the way. So let's go to God in prayer this morning. God, thank you for a chance to worship you, and we just thank you for everything that is going on in and through our church, and how you're using us through small groups to care for one another and to help each other grow in our faith journeys, how you're using us through hypothermia to just support people who desperately need help, to how you're using folks in our church to meet the needs of refugees in our area, and just everything else. And so we thank you and we praise you for just allowing us to be a small part of those things. And I do pray you just continue to bless everything that we're doing, that it would be honoring and glorifying to the people we're serving, but ultimately it would be honoring and glorifying to you. In Christ's name I pray, amen. So today I want to talk about community. Since we're getting ready to launch small groups, sometimes we kind of circle back around and talk about the importance of community. And I want to start with some quick confession. And I know we're Protestant, but that's okay. We can also do confession. And I want you to hang with me here, because this really does have something to do with where we're going. So confession, how many of you have ever had a piece of exercise equipment in your house and you didn't use it so much for exercise as you use it to hang laundry on to dry? Your kids used it as a jungle gym. It collected dust. Anybody just guts enough to raise your hand? Lots of people, you've had that. And I've done that. That elliptical, that treadmill, that Stairmaster. If you want to go way back old school, that Nordic track. Remember, my dad had a Nordic track, that ski thing that I could never figure out how to get going on. But lots of us have done that, even if we don't want to raise our hand and admit it this morning. Now, are you familiar with this term right here, gently used, right? We're all familiar with that term. In the old days, we used to just call it used. Now it's gently used, which essentially means I bought it, and I bought it brand new, and it's still almost brand new because I didn't really use it, right? Gently used. And do you know what the best deal of all time, anywhere on gently used anything, the best deal, I mean, you can just save hundreds and hundreds of dollars on this stuff, but it's gently used consumer-grade fitness equipment, right? I mean, this stuff, if you look, trust me, just Google search it. It is everywhere. You can find it on eBay, Fairfax, Facebook Marketplace, Let Go, all of that stuff. And when I say gently used, I mean, when you see this stuff, you're like, did anybody use this at all? And the answer is not really, right? And the interesting thing about consumer-grade fitness equipment is that the original purchasers, and a lot of us, we've been original purchasers, but the original purchasers, they purchased this stuff because, I mean, we purchased it to begin with. I mean, why did we purchase it, right? We purchased it because we believed in something, didn't we? We believed in fitness, we believed in exercise, we believed in getting in our cardio, we believed in health. And the reason this stuff is such a good deal and it's gently used is not because we didn't believe, it's because we didn't use it. Because often when it comes to exercise, people don't act on what they believe. Do you? Do we? And as we all know, I mean, when it comes to the area of health, whether it's nutritional health or exercise, believing makes absolutely no difference when it comes to your health. Not at all. Believing doesn't really do anything for you. In fact, we probably all believe basically the same things as it relates to nutrition and exercise and all that. We're probably all believers when it comes to health, but believing doesn't do anything. What is it that makes a difference? Right here, doing is what makes all the difference, doesn't it? In fact, many of you that do exercise, many of you that have exercised, how many of you are like me? You've actually exercised with a bad attitude. Anybody? You didn't want to do it, you didn't want to go, you didn't feel like it, but you did it anyway, right? I mean, you can have a terrible attitude. In fact, you can actually believe it's not even doing anything for you, and it still will do something for you. It still does good because doing is what makes all the difference, not believing. Now, this is true in a lot of areas of our lives. We're going to talk about community in just a minute, but one more thing about exercise. Isn't it true for those of us who actually exercise or we used to exercise at some point, doesn't having a partner make all the difference in the world for you? I mean, it's so much easier to talk yourself out of exercising if nobody is there waiting for you, isn't it? And for those of you who have actually hired a trainer and you've paid for a trainer and you've made an appointment, on those mornings when you would normally just talk yourself out of it, you could just roll right back over and hit snooze again, but you know he's waiting for you. You know she's waiting for you, and so you show up. Or when it's a team sport, and you know there's a group of people who are counting on you to be there, you're just more inclined to show up, because here's the deal. Accountability works, doesn't it? Especially when it comes to exercise. Now, these two principles, believing doesn't make a difference, doing is what makes a difference, and accountability works. These two principles hold true in our faith journey as well. Every Christian, think about this, every Christian actually believes, right? I mean, it's why in the New Testament we're sometimes referred to as believers. Why? Because if you're a Christian, there's something that you believe. We all believe something. But the other thing we all know is not all believers actually act on what we believe, just like with exercise. We believe in the New Testament. We believe what the New Testament teaches. We believe that what Jesus taught, but we don't always forgive other people like we're told to. We don't always love our enemies like we're instructed to. Many Christians have never been baptized, although Jesus was really, really clear about that. Very few believers actually give generously in the way that Jesus taught about being generous, and I could go on and on and on. We believe, and if someone attacks our faith or questions it, we're pretty quick to defend, what we believe. But what Jesus says and what the New Testament teaches, it's not believing that makes a difference. in our lives. It's what we do with what we believe that has the potential to make all of the difference. And here's something that we all need to understand. We can't follow Jesus in isolation. You could be a Christian. You can be a member of a church. You can do all of that. But when it comes to following Jesus and actually following what Jesus did and who Jesus was and what he instructed us to do and believe, you cannot do it in isolation. We can't follow Jesus by ourselves. In fact, the Apostle Paul, when he talked to people about what it meant to follow Jesus, practically speaking, he underscored the fact that this is a very, very relational thing. It's a community thing. And if you go through all of the letters of the Apostle Paul, he actually gives us a list. We could call them the one another's list. And he says that this is what it actually looks like to act on your faith. Here's what it actually looks like to follow Jesus. And he just gives us this list. He says, forgive one another, accept one another, care for one another, encourage one another, submit to one another, restore one another, carry one another's burdens, and bear with one another. And Paul would say, if you're a Jesus follower, this is what it looks like. And clearly, you can't do any of this alone, can we? And the point being, it's not enough to believe it privately. You have to behave it publicly. It's not enough to simply believe it privately, because belief doesn't make any practical difference in our lives. It's doing, just like with exercise, that makes all of the difference. Now, I think this is a really big deal. And it's a big deal. And the reason I think it's a big deal is I, like a lot of you, and I was raised in what I would call a very vertical version of Christianity. That the Christian culture that I grew up in, and I'm not knocking it. I grew up in a great home and a great family and a great church and all of that. I told you last week, my dad was a pastor for 40 years. He was my pastor for most of those times. But I grew up in a culture that measured spiritual maturity as being moral and being generous. That was essentially it. Very vertical. As long as I behaved myself and as long as I gave my money, I could be confident that God was good with me. And that's very vertical. God, how are we doing? Okay, we're doing okay, aren't we? Yeah, I'm behaving, I'm following the rules, and I'm giving. And so I'm good with you, God, and you're good with me, right? And the reality of that kind of faith is that while being moral is very important, and while being generous, we just said, is very important. Jesus talked about it. It's not that those things are not good things. It's just that those things are not enough. So what I want to do for just a few minutes is I want to show you a passage in the New Testament book of Hebrews. And so if you've got a Bible, you want to head to the back of that Bible where Hebrews is. If you've got a phone or an iPad, or if you're at home online, go to BibleGateway.com or YouVersion. All of those are great places to grab Bibles. If you don't have any of that, we'll throw everything up on the screen. But the book of Hebrews, we don't really know who wrote the book of Hebrews. But we do know that it was written to Jews who were living in the first century who had become Christians. And what I want to show you is how the author of Hebrews, as a Christian living in the first century, I want to show you how quickly they're able to kind of shift back and forth from this vertical orientation of faith to this very horizontal orientation of faith. So it's not either or, it's both and. So here's Hebrews chapter 10, and I'm starting down in verse 19. It says, "Therefore, brothers and sisters, since we have confidence to enter the most holy place by the blood of Jesus." Now, let me hit the pause for just a minute. And again, the author is writing to Jews who have become Christians. So when they hear this terminology, when they see his language here, and he mentions the holy place, they know exactly what he's talking about. He's talking about the Holy of Holies, which was at the center of the temple, and only the high priests could go into the Holy of Holies and represent you to God. They were the only ones allowed in there. And because of what he said earlier, he's saying now that we're Jesus followers, we have direct access to God through Christ. We don't have to have a priest anymore to get to God. And then he goes on and he says, we have access by a new and living way opened for us through the curtain, and not the physical curtain that actually hung as a barrier between the temple court and the holies of holies. And again, everyone reading this knew exactly what he was talking about. in that culture. He said the new way is through his body, talking about Jesus, talking about Christ. And since we have a great priest over the house of God, let us, and again, this is very vertical. It says, he said, it's just me and God. It's very vertical. Let us draw near to God with a sincere heart and with the full assurance that faith brings, having our hearts sprinkled to cleanse us from a guilty conscience and having our bodies washed with pure water. And that is just very, very vertical type of faith, isn't it? But then he shifts. He kind of pivots, and then he says this. He says, let us hold unswervingly. And any of you who have a teenage driver in your house, you love that word unswervingly, don't you? I loved it when I had a teenage driver in my house, and I still wish she would not drive swervingly. But let us, she's not here, thank goodness, this morning. Let us hold unswervingly to the hope we profess, for he who promised is faithful. So he goes from vertical, we have access to God. We can pray to God on our own. We don't need a priest or a temple. It's a new day and all of that. But then he shifts and he says, while we're on this planet, we need to be faithful to the things we've been called to do. Unlike our private belief, which is good and important, but very vertical, he says we need to live it out horizontally. And then he says this, he gets very, very specific. He says, and let us consider, or let us give careful attention to, let us consider how we may spur, and here's Paul's phrase, how we may spur one another on. And so the author, he pivots again from this invisible, I pray to God, I'm good with God, God is good with me, I have access to God, from this intangible to this very doable, highly relational phase of our faith. He says, let us spur each other on. And I love this term spur. It's so interesting when you look at it in the Greek. He says, in your relationships with other believers, in your relationship in the church, he says, I want you to spur each other on. And he literally means, I want you to stir each other up. I want you to stir each other up. I want you to irritate each other. I want you to provoke each other. I want you to be in each other's lives to the point that when you see a friend drifting in their faith, you have access to that friend. Or when you see that couple struggling in their marriage and in their relationship, you have access to that couple. Or when you see that couple and they have that kid who's just heading in the wrong direction, and mom and dad, they don't know what to do with that kid, you have access to that kid. I want you to be in relationship with each other in such a way that you are able to spur each other on positively, and at times it may go a little negatively, but I want you to be in each other's lives in a significant way, to spur each other on. This is very, very relational. And what are we to spur each other on to? He gets really, really practical. He says, spur each other on toward good love and good deeds. So this is belief in action, isn't it? This is his way of saying, you need to get on that treadmill. Don't just leave it sitting in your garage. You need to get on that elliptical and use it. Don't just let it sit and collect dust or hang clothes on it in your basement. He says you need to actually do something, because owning it and believing in it does nothing for you any more than simply knowing that I can pray to God and I have a clear conscience with God. And the Apostle Paul and the author of Hebrews says, yeah, that's great, but what are you doing? Because doing is what makes all the difference. And chances are, if you're not doing very much, they would say, if you're not doing very much, if you don't have someone in your life that you're spurring on, that is spurring you on and encouraging you to make progress, and the writer of Hebrews would say, then you're going to run into some trouble in your faith journey. And then the author of Hebrews, he gets really up in all of our business when he says the next thing. He says this, not giving up meeting together as some are in the habit of doing. Now, when I grew up, preachers would read that verse and they would teach that it means you need to come in church and you need to sit in a row. In the old days, it was you need to sit in a pew. And I know why they did that. It's because preachers are notorious for loving to count heads, right? We can kind of judge how we're doing by the number of people sitting there, or at least that's how it used to be done. But I don't think that's what the writer of Hebrews had in mind at all. I don't think that's what they were talking about based on what they've already said, if you go back and look at the full context, and what they're about to say next. The author of Hebrews is saying that if you're not meeting together in such a way that you're able to spur each other on, if you're not in community with other believers where you're in each other's lives and you're encouraging each other, then there's something missing, and it may eventually impact your faith. And here's what I think Paul and the author of Hebrews is trying to get us to understand. It's that there is a divinely designed correlation between community and faithfulness. That there is a divinely designed correlation between community, being in community, not just sitting in rows, but being in circles with other believers. There's a correlation between community and faithfulness to God. Because here's the deal. Faith comes alive in community. And here's why. Because community is where you see it working and where you are challenged to work it. And if you're not in intentional community with other believers, you will very possibly become self-centered or self-focused and short-sighted. Now, isn't this true? And this is just a little bit of a side here, just kind of a sermon point A, right? But a little bit of a tangent if you'll let me go on it. But isn't it true? And by the way, if you're looking at a church, this might help you understand a little bit about who we are and who we want to be. But isn't it true right here that the people who think they're better than other people haven't taken the time to hear the stories of the people they think they're better than? Let me read that again. Isn't it true that people who think they are better than other people just haven't taken the time to listen and understand the stories of the people they think they're better than? Isn't that true? In other words, as soon as you get in community with someone, as soon as you get into a relationship with someone and you hear their story, don't you go, oh, okay, that makes sense. And if you're really dialed in emotionally, you may begin to think, if I had grown up there and if I had had your experiences and if I had been taught that, then I would probably be just like you too. In other words, hearing people's story, hearing a person's story is what brings people together, and this is what community is. And this is what the body of Christ is. And in the first century church, it was amazing. I mean, men and women, rich and poor, adults and children, they would come together in these little groups, and what they had in common wasn't power, and it wasn't position, it wasn't money, it wasn't reputation, it wasn't any of that. What they had in common was Jesus, and that was it. And it was so unusual in that day. And it was so powerful. And if you go back and if you read that part of Christian history, you'll see that it was that kind of community that changed the world, that changed the culture of the time. And that's why the author of Hebrews says, I can't believe, he's speaking to these Christians in the first century, he says, I can't believe that some of you have given up on meeting together. I mean, what are you thinking, he's saying? I mean, you can't do this alone, that there is a divinely designed thing to it of being with one another together. And so here's how he concludes this passage. He says, not giving up meeting together, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching. He says, every single believer, no matter how strong your faith is, you need to be in a relationship where you are encouraged by people, and people are encouraging you, and you are encouraging them. And what does it mean to encourage? Here's what it means to encourage. It means to instill courage in someone else. That's all it means. It's simply to instill courage in someone else. And why do we need that? Because it takes faith. It takes courage to live out your faith at where you work, doesn't it? It takes courage to live out your faith sometimes in the marketplace. It takes courage to live out your faith sometimes in your neighborhood. It takes courage. If you're a student, it takes courage to live out your faith in your school and in your group of friends and on that sports team that you might be on. It takes courage sometimes to live out your faith, sometimes in your family when there's family members that may be a little hostile towards faith. It takes courage, doesn't it? Courage for what? Courage to do something, not just to believe something. Courage to do the hard thing, to do the selfless thing, to do the generous thing, to do the forgiving thing. So the author of Hebrews says, you need to be in community. You need others, and others need you. So here's my question this morning, and I'll leave it here. But is anyone outside of your family, is anyone spurring you on to live out your faith? Is there anyone in your life? Is there a group of people in your life who are spurring you on? Or have you, like some of the Christians that the Hebrew writer was writing to in the first century, have you perhaps given up on meeting together? Who do you have that's spurring you on and who you are spurring on in return? That's why small groups are so important to us around here. Small groups give you an opportunity to do just what we're challenged to do by this Hebrew writer here, to encourage others and to be encouraged by others. And I believe small groups are the best way to grow in your faith, even better than what we're doing right here, right now. Now, I know that what some of you are thinking, you're thinking, well, I just don't have time to do this. Well, you don't have time to exercise either, do you? But you wish you did. You know you would be better for it. You know you'd be healthier if you did. And for those of you who have prioritized exercise, you know that you had to give some things up to make that possible in order to do it because you knew it was good for you and you wanted to, right? And those of you who have prioritized community, I mean, you've made it a priority to show up for small group. If you were to talk to them, they would tell you, and you can ask them if you want to, but they would tell you it's worth it. They would tell you that they are better off because they've been in community. So I hope you will take a chance and commit to community as we get ready to start a brand new small group semester. And if you do, what many of you will find there are some of the best people you will ever meet in your life. And some of you will meet some of the best friends you'll have for the rest of your life. So find a group. We'll help you find a group if you can't find one. And see what God does in your life and in the lives of the other people that you're connected with. And by the way, I always say this, you're not joining a group for the rest of your life. You're only joining it for about 12 weeks. And then we'll take a break, and then we'll come back around, and we'll have a new semester, and there's some on-ramps and off-ramps, and if you need to jump out of that group because it wasn't a good fit, or you want to check out another group and see if it's a better fit, then you've got that opportunity built right in. And so I'll be out in the lobby, like I said. Lex will be around. We'd love to talk to you about this semester's small groups, and we can introduce you to some of the leaders that are here today and let you connect with them. But find community. You'll be so happy that you did. Let me pray for you. God, I thank you for this writer of Hebrews. I thank you that they just challenged the people that they were writing to, and it challenges us today to recognize how important it is to not try to do this alone, to not try to walk through our faith journey and just figure everything out by ourselves and not have any kind of accountability. And God, just like exercise and health and all of that, we know that doing is what makes all the difference. That's the way community is here. And so thank you for challenging us today. And God, I pray that you would just bless each and every one of the small groups that we have, the ones that are on paper, that are going to be that everybody here can join, and then those that are just kind of meeting on the side, just they've put them together themselves. I just pray you would bless each and every one. I pray you'd bless the relationships that are built there, and that everyone would be encouraged, that everybody would be spurred on in their faith in some way. In Christ's name I pray, amen. So thanks for being here. We're going to sing one more song as we do. Just a reminder, intro class is February 26th. We'd love to have you join that. So just see me if you want more information about that, or shoot us an email so we can just be prepared. Small groups, like I said, we've got the information out there. Grief Share, Ellie will be here next week to talk a little bit more to you about what Grief Share involves. And we'll be putting more of that information in our newsletter this week. And then don't forget, join us for hypothermia. I hope you have a great week. I hope you have a great afternoon, whether you're watching the Super Bowl or you're taking advantage to go do something else. Have a great afternoon. Have a great week. And we'll see you next week. Let's stand and sing.